Welcome to the CyberRants podcast, where we're all about sharing the forbidden secrets and slightly embellished truths about corporate cybersecurity programs. We're ranting, we're raving, and we're telling you the stuff that nobody talks about on their fancy website and trade show giveaways, all to protect you from cybersecurity criminals. And now, here's your hosts, Mike Rotondo, Zach Fuller, and Lauro Chavez.
Hello, and welcome to the CyberRants podcast. This is your co-host, Zach Fuller, joined by Mike Rotondo and Lauro Chavez. We have an excellent show today, as usual, planned, ready to go. Be interesting to see where this conversation goes. But before we start, Mike, why don't you kick us off with the news?
The news of the day. Good day, and welcome to podcast 2 of 2021. Hey, the ransomware gangs are scavenging for sensitive data by targeting top executives. Yes, your least technical people with the most information are now targets again. Keep that in mind when you're going through your training. Your execs may need a little extra training. Google Titan security keys hacked by French researchers. Yep, the Google security is now hackable. Malicious software infrastructure easier to get to and deploy than ever. Now it is no longer a command line. It's now point and click. Even younger script kiddies or script kiddies with even less skills can now hack you. I guess it's progress. Team TNT botnet now steals Docker API and AWS credentials. Lock that AWS down. Make sure that you are double checking your security. But there's bad stuff out there, guys. Android malware claims to give hackers full control of your smartphone. As if the Android hasn't been hacked enough, there's now a rat out there called Rogue that can basically give people complete control of your smartphone. Security research claiming downloading 70 terabytes of sensitive Parler data. We're going to touch more about this later, but Parler, if you haven't heard, was shut down, and now the data apparently has been hacked. Intel adds hardware-enabled ransomware detection to 11 Gen V Pro chips. That's kind of interesting, actually. I think that's something that is positive. That if they can actually make that work, that's a great advancement. Another interesting headline: massive IT employee disconnect hindering remote productivity. This is a discussion about how IT sees working remote and how people working remote see working remote from a technical perspective. So we will touch on that later in the podcast as well. Office January security updates fix remote code execution bugs. Yep, there's more Microsoft bugs. It's 2021, the 15th, and we've got multiple critical patches already. Cisco addresses high severity flaw in CMX software. We have Cisco releasing addressing 67 high severity vulnerabilities. Patch up your Cisco. Cyber criminals are bypassing multi-factor authentication to access organizations' cloud services. That's scary. MFA, which was for a long time considered to be almost bulletproof, is now becoming vulnerable. Look into your CISA. CISA has some warnings out there, as well as some potential ways to deal with that, but it is becoming an epidemic. And the last story, it's finally over. We can now all uninstall Adobe Flash Player. It's dead. That's the headlines. Laura?
Sayonara. I had a lot of good times with Flash. It's been a long road, Adobe. Thank God.
I was just about to ask you, Mike, if you have any good news for us, and you ended on a good note there.
Yeah.
It's at least something good's happening.
Yeah. All right. So, typically this is the moment where I go into vulnerabilities. Like, that's not ever going to be new vulnerabilities out there. So I thought I'd take a conversation where it might be more valuable to the listeners and start talking about available exploits that are working against said vulnerabilities that we talked about previously on the show, and that might be out right now. So instead of just telling you to patch your systems, I'm going to tell you why you should patch your systems because of the available exploits that are going to be available for download in tools like Metasploit. And some modules that will be also capable to be parsed into Cobalt Strike. So of those things, let's talk about PaperStream IP. If you're running PaperStream, there is a local privilege escalation that's been validated to work. That exploit will work. Okay, Gatia remote code execution is there. Sonatype Nexus, if you've got it installed, there is a remote code execution that gives you authenticated privileges. That has been validated by multiple researchers this month. This is all very current things from the beginning of the month. So WordPress for WP Discuss and Auto Optimize, both of those authenticated arbitrary file uploads have been validated. Those are PHP files can go right up to one of the WordPress plugins running 7 or 2.7. For those, the custom global variables for WordPress, also another validated exploit this month. So again, make sure that your WordPress plugins are updated. Very, very important. And then of course, the big one for today is the Netcia Serba. It's an authentication bypass and adds a root user, and the module is available from Metasploit. And it's been validated by 15 researchers at this point. So if you've got Netcia Serba 16, make sure that you're looking at that in a very serious way. That's enough today, Zach.
I like it. Thank you, Laura. Interesting to see what's happening out there, and I've actually had people tell me that, oh, WordPress is extremely secure and you can't go wrong and all that. Like, well, it's a great platform, but introduce these plugins and problems will certainly occur. So I've seen it happen. We have a little bit different approach today. So we've been talking about general topics in the books and improving your cybersecurity programs and such, but there's some really interesting things that have happened and some interesting articles that have come out recently. So we'll talk about 2 of those today. Let's dive right into the first one. This is an article from HelpNet Security. If you haven't seen their site, just helpnetsecurity.com. And this article came out this week, January 13th, and it is titled Massive IT Employee Disconnect Hindering Remote Productivity. The article is all about the disconnect between employees and the IT departments, what IT teams believe to be true in terms of connectivity, satisfaction, visibility, all those things. And it turns out employees that are surveyed think much, much differently. So I think it's time to get on the same page with the rest of the staff. Now, I'm curious to see what you guys think, but to me, this has always been a problem, right? I don't think an employee has ever said, I love my work machine. I love showing up to work and getting on my Windows desktop there in my cube, and it just is wonderful and works all the time, and I can always print and email always works. I don't think that's ever happened in history. I could be wrong, but I think there's always been a disconnect. It's interesting to see that now that there's not butts and seats in an office, so to speak, and everybody's working remote from home, it's causing even more issues.
Well, I mean, coming from an IT perspective, I can tell you the end users are wrong.
Right. Was it the problem?
I always liked my company provided laptop after I rooted it with admin access and installed the apps I needed and got the printer drivers to work. I mean, then it worked fine. So I'm sure that's the problem, right? You know, the configuration changes I think that are necessary to be made to secure those remote endpoints when they're in various locations, people's homes, maybe a coffee shop, do have problems, right? I mean, and a lot of this, there wasn't a lot of time to test these things. People had to be remote immediately. So all the testing now is being done, you know, pretty much in parallel with real world ops.
Well, I think there's also a disconnect between, you know, IT. Without IT having regular interaction with their user base, I think what's happening is that the roadmap for IT and what's being done is not necessarily done for the usability of the end user right now, where they're focused on security, which they should be, but may hinder usability. And I think that's one of the complaints in the article is that they're not taking the employee into account. So they're almost being pushed aside from a security perspective. That being said, it's kind of a two-edged sword that, you know, you have to choose security versus usability. And that's something we face all the time. You know, and if you have non-responsive remote users or you have critical patches, they need to be done. And that may interrupt employee productivity from time to time. Whereas if you have the machines in the office, you have more control over them. So, I mean, it's a tough road to hoe.
I think too, you got to wonder, because if we go back to the user errors, right? The old picnic error, the problem in chair, not in computer, or the ID10T errors. Well, how many times do you think we're thinking about? A lot of employees are going to have very little training or not be very skilled in their use of their machines. And so how often before were they able to talk to the person sitting at the desk next to them or say, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? Whereas now working remotely, they don't have that option, right? So they either have to figure it out themselves, which probably creates more frustration, or reach out to the help desk remotely. They're not going to have that handhold necessarily.
Totally. IT's always been trying to accomplish self-service, right? They've always wanted some form of a checkout cart where the user could go and say, I need this software installed, and check it out in a cart, and then it gets applied later in an update, right? And so I think what's happening is, not just neglect for the user, but I think in a manner in which to purvey the importance of these changes to the user. Because one of the problems that we face is we'll have an organization, and we'll run them through a CMMC gap assessment or PCI or something similar, and they'll come back that they had that they're missing multi-factor authentication for majority of the workforce as a best practice, and that might be a work stream that is stalled for 2+ years just because the body of the employees don't want to do it. They don't want to have to use a one-time PIN, right, as an additional part of a login. And they'll fight that change, and management will sort of listen to the people, and because they want productivity and they want everybody to be happy. But at the same time, like you said, it's a double-edged sword, Mike. You're negating that security to basically cater to the needs of the people. And what'll happen is that somebody eventually will make a mistake, use a weak password, or a login will get brute forced, and that easy change with multi-factor, while is it one more thing to do? Sure, but look at the next level of security layers it provides over traditional single login.
One of the mentions in the article, it actually states 100% of surveyed IT managers believe end users are satisfied with the service desk experience. And that statement, that result of the survey just blew me away. That's pretty confident. I mean, if I was running a IT help desk or IT services, right, I don't know that I would be able to say, yeah, 100%, everybody is satisfied. People are satisfied with work. I would say that they're satisfied for the most part, or at a certain level, but not with certainty that everybody's good, because then it goes on to say that yet only 44% of the remote employees are completely satisfied. So kind of an interesting thing, goes back to what you mentioned, Mike, about not really caring so much, kind of thinking, oh, well, it's just the employee's problem. But you take that disconnect and then compound it with those security issues like you're mentioning, Laura, trying to add additional steps. It's gonna cause ongoing problems. But the fact of the matter is, we got to figure this out in the world of technology, because it has to happen, especially with remote working is here to stay. So this is going to be a big thing. I think there's going to be a lot more companies spinning up new technologies, new consulting firms, just to tackle this problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's going to have to be addressed, and it's something that's really never going to be 100%. It's a scary number. I don't know 100% of people that would agree on 100% of anything.
Right. Sure. I know.
So it's just bizarre. And my guess is, and that's maybe the old cynic in me, but just about the time all the vaccines are distributed, we'll figure it out. So
yeah, well, they'll probably either decide to bring people back house, right, or like you said, I think the remote workforce is here to stay for the majority of companies, but I think that there will be some that go back to that traditional want that human in a seat paradigm.
Well, yeah, and we have some clients that have talked about that. I mean, they were in the process of doing giant renovations of their buildings and their working spaces, and they've invested serious amounts of capital. And to say, oh, no, you guys should just work from home. I mean, obviously, they're not necessarily going to do that, right? So,
well, to wrap up this article, it says that 53% of IT managers claim they spend most of their time working on securing the remote workforce. But on the other hand, security is not within the top 3 priorities that employees listed for IT organizations. Rather, the top employee concerns included preventing IT issues altogether and the speed in which issues are resolved. So it just goes to show that still, of course, security for the standard users, security takes a back seat to convenience, right? Of course, they have to be able to have easy access to their technologies, and I think that's going to be take a long time to change. there's
Well, I
not.
think that's a missed educational opportunity too, because I mean, I think there needs to be, and maybe that's what's missing is an education. This is why we're doing these security things, right? I mean, the dark web, the cyber criminals have declared war on remote access, and yeah, we need to inconvenience you with some additional security measures.
Yeah.
It needs to be communicated, not just implemented.
People.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, absolutely. They forget to see the big picture. It's like, well, would I rather go through this extra step and keep my job, or would I rather go through a major breach and have the company lay off a bunch of people?
Right.
I mean, to me, that's pretty easy choice, but I'm biased from being in the business, right? But interesting stuff. I don't think it's going to get solved overnight, but at least people are thinking about it, and COVID has certainly changed the way we look at the use of IT and staffing for organizations in general. So the next article is from hackread.com. So just check out their website. Good source of information, and it is about Parler. People probably heard on the news all about Parler, but the title of the article from January 11th is Security Researchers Claims Downloading 70 Terabytes of Sensitive Parler Data. Laura, you and I, we were talking about Parler, and you gave a real good overview the other day. Do you want to do kind of a recap for those people who haven't followed it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I want to try to keep, so this, this is a kind of a sensitive conversation for a lot of people. And this, certainly does raise a question about, our republic, right? And what powers corporations have. But essentially, Parler, for those who do not know, was a place of, let's just call it internet freedom. You could post things there and it was not moderated. Sites that are moderated that will censor your content are places like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, sources like that, Twitter, right? If you post something, they have teams and they have AI, they're gonna censor what you say. So Parler was one of those locations that was still very free speech, very, digital freedom. So there was a lot of content getting posted there, right? And again, I'm trying to say politics out of it. I try to want to leave that out of it, but people were posting their opinions, freedom of speech opinions on this site. And in any case, what had happened is that because of the notoriety with this app and with the policing that was happening with Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, individuals were abandoning those apps for what we refer to as alt tech, okay, which is what Parler was. It was part of alt tech. So if you're not familiar with BitChute or Library or Gab, for example, right, these are all alt tech sites that give you an opportunity to go someplace that's more digitally free and it's not censored. So when this had this mass exodus from mainstream tech to alt tech, especially to Parler, Google was the first organization to come forth and say, hey, we don't like the way you're operating your business. You're not policing your content. And so we're going to remove your app from the App Store. So once you remove Google Play, from the Google Play Store, now all the Droid phones that are part Google can't get it. And so Apple followed suit. Apple also removed the app Parler from their App Store, disallowing anybody that had an iPhone or an Apple product from being able to install that application, which that's okay. You can still go to the website. You can still read it there. At which point Amazon AWS services put forth that they were going to terminate the Parler services. So they had all their data and everything stored there in AWS, right? They were using AWS Elastic. And so that got terminated at midnight. According to what Amazon said, they kept their word and they terminated the site. Okay, so during this time, right, things are getting turned down. The Parler technical team's probably running around trying to figure out backups. Okay, well, unfortunately, there was a insecure direct object vulnerability with the site. Okay, and a hacker named Donk Imby basically was able to exploit that and pull down every post that had ever been sent to Parler in order, because she could guess the string, right, the query string for the reference object. So because of that, she the individual knew everything where it was going to be and could pull it all down. And it had location data, it had times, dates, it had the original content from every post. So anybody who ever posted anything to Parler through the app or through the website was pulled down in this particular data siphon. And so that data is going to include usernames, it's going to include location data. because Parler didn't scrub that, right? They weren't scrubbing any of this type of metadata from those posts. So I'll pause there. That's probably enough, Zach. I think that kind of hopefully gives a good background to everybody on what exactly happened. So here we are. Parler's been basically put into the dirt in the course of about a week, from the disbandment of all of the supporting technologies to the turning off of the actual operating systems and instances in the Amazon cloud, leaving the organization essentially not having anything to do and nowhere for those people to get their data back or anything that they saved or accounts or anything. So eradicated, eviscerated.
It's pretty interesting stuff going on. The bigger picture, there's clearly a war going on for control of the media, of people, of Americans, really thoughts, opinions, ideas, trying to shape culture, trying to shape the outcomes of all kinds of different things, and I mean, it's been going on a long time in advertising and such, tracking user activities and all that, but these big tech companies have more and more power, and it makes you wonder. There's been this big rush to the cloud and using all cloud services, and which there's a lot of benefits to that, of course, but it makes you wonder, well, are issues like that going to make people start bringing it back out of the cloud, start going to their own hardware, building their own data centers again, be more focused on control of
be more like Hillary Clinton. I hope so, right?
No.
I certainly hope so. And Mike has heard me call the cloud a fad for a really long time. I'm a big believer that
it's just somebody else's computer.
It is. It's someone else's computer, and that all sounds great because now you think you don't have to manage it, you don't have to own it. There's this shift of risk that you don't have to now worry about from your business. But look at Parler. To know that your services are in the hand of another party, and then that party can decide your fate at any given time based on something that maybe content that's not even, you're providing a platform. One of your users may have posted something, right, that wasn't agreed with the community again. So here's this whole freedom of speech thing. But yeah, absolutely. If Parler had their own hardware rented in a data center space in a couple places in the United States, maybe overseas, I think they would still be fine. I think the Pirate Bay CEO said it best. They have no excuse. It's infantile that they can't stay in business. Pirate Bay is still running and they get hunted down every day. And they've just been rolling servers from location to location, right? Swinging DNS over and over and over again to keep things rolling, right? It's literally like having a chop shop on a train or on a bus or in a rider truck rolling around the cities.
So just, to take, just Parler out of it. I mean, going back to, I've worked for several large companies. I'm sure, Laura, you have too, that have their own cloud. That's one thing. But I mean, when you work with a major bank and they don't trust the cloud with their data, why would you, right? Why wouldn't you you can offload some service. Yeah, the Elastic is great, or the Elastic ability is great. But the fact is, you got to have a backup, right? You have to have your own steel. You got to have your own bare metal that you can control your content and you can control certain parts of your aspect in your business. And I think what's happened is that financial decisions have overtaken sound technical decisions. And I think what's happening is they're looking at accounting and going, well, it costs us X number of dollars to be in the cloud. It costs us 2 times that to have our own hardware. We're just going to go cloud. And I think people are putting themselves in risk. I think businesses are putting themselves in risk by being 100% cloud dependent and not having anything on-prem. I think there's a risk to being 100% Office 365. I mean, Exchange servers aren't really that hard to manage. Your own Active Directory isn't that hard to manage. And I think, for growth for a small company, that is valuable. But, as you mature and grow as a company, you should be having your own infrastructure, your own backbone. Going back to Parler, I don't get it. I mean, forgive me for being a cynic here and being the old guy in the room, but the guys, the CEO is an under 30, tech integrator or tech guy who, probably never grew up without a cloud, right? And didn't do things the way we did back in the early 2000s, where we had massive data centers and massive co-location, and we had massive teams that managed the servers. And, would never have thought of offloading, to somebody else. So, I mean, there is no excuse. And Pirate Bay, the CEO of Pirate Bay is right. I mean, there is no excuse.
So what you're saying is money's defied logic, really, right?
Yeah.
Back then you had copies of all your punch cards, right? I mean,
hold on. He's up there. He's up there, Chip. Oh, we're not that old, okay? Look at your
have all your data.
Your whippersnapper.
Well, and that's the thing. But since when has redundancy, the requirement for redundant systems, gone by the wayside? And that's the thing, is that you may have Amazon, Azure, all these platforms are great, but still have redundancy, right? Because you don't have control over those third parties, and even though they're massive conglomerates, they're still third parties, right? And so right. I think it's the old saying, 2 is 1, 1 is none, right? If you have one of something, when it goes down, you have nothing. And so the focus on redundant systems, backups, all that, I think has been maybe as a society we've been a little too trustworthy, just because they're big names and everybody else does it that way.
You just said 1 is 0. You're going to make a bunch of mathematicians mad now.
Well, let me go back to. I mean, I remember the days of taking the backups to Iron Mountain, the tapes to Iron Mountain every week.
Oh, I got one better than that. I remember when the shredder truck pulled up and I had to stand there and chunk my stuff into the massive shredder, big metal teeth, and then I had to watch it be destroyed. I had to sign a paper.
Well, yeah. My point on that is a tape in Iron Mountain or whatever, I can't remember, Iron Vault or whatever the name of the company was, isn't going to get corrupted, right? I mean, it may be corrupted over time, but your backups aren't being hacked, right? I mean, how many times have we seen, well, we got online backup and all that, by the way, that's been corrupted because that's what the hackers went after first, right? So you don't have a restore point. You don't have a restore point because your restore point's been destroyed. Your tape's in a mountain somewhere underground. You restore everything from tape. It's done. You've eliminated part of the ransomware thing. And I think, I've said this many times. I say this to people who do business on their phone. It's like everything that makes it easier for you to use makes it easier for us to break into.
Oh, totally. Well, you remember that no-named firm that lost all that Bitcoin, right, for the phone?
Right. Right.
Well, so I worked for one of the large power companies at one point, right? And they still had a big data center underground with the big silos running tapes, the robotic arms. They had like 6 or 7 of those silos. I mean, they weren't betting anything but long-term data storage, right? And again, I think every security practitioner out there probably feels like we do. They're like, we've seen a problem with this cloud situation the whole time. But again, that money savings over reason is the reason we're here in the first place. It's like pay a little more and then have the ability to always control your hardware and the data that's on it. Always, right? You can just go in there and put your hands on it. Yeah. You're not going to go to a Google data center. You're not getting into Amazon. You're not going to see the whatever bread box they've got running your stuff on. You're never going to see that.
Right.
Well, I'm pretty upset they did away with the zip drive. Those were great backup devices, but your reality is cloud is has created a lot of benefits for a lot of organizations. But again, back to redundant systems. People I think are becoming a little too trustworthy and very much favoring convenience and cost over the long-term benefits and long-term security. So we could certainly rant about these topics, I think, all day long, but we are a bit over time here. So thank you everyone for listening. Share your comments. Be sure to rate the show on your favorite podcast platform and let us know if there are any topics you want us to rant about, and we will schedule it for future episodes. Thanks a lot and have a great day.
Pick up your copy of the CyberRants book on Amazon today. And if you're looking to take your cybersecurity program to the next level, visit us online at www.silentsector.com. Join us next time for another edition of the CyberRants podcast.